And I'm live with his Jeffness, Jeff, the SP Spaz Miller. Great channel. He's not got a proper computer at the moment, but I'm sure when he has, he'll be back uploading videos. Right.
But, you know, Christmas is coming up soon, so you never know.
Yep, you never know. Right. You might think you know, but you don't know. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight. Oh yeah. So folks, MBTI, and a little bit of Kersey. Oh, in fact, a lot of Kersey. So basically, this show is like Homicide, Life of the Censors, because it's like most of the characters are sentient types.
That is true, but then of course that's true in more professions than not.
Yeah. It's like the sentient types and Munch.
Right. Yeah, that's true, especially because I think the only other prominent intuitive type, I think, in the detectives anyway, was Crissetti, and obviously he's not around anymore. So.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see Crissetti. What type do you think Crissetti was?
I think he was probably an INTJ. That's my guess. But, you know, obviously he was only in 13 episodes and several of those not prominently featured, so we didn't get a whole lot of time and episodes and interactions to really think about his type that much. But that was my guess. Right. Anyway, so we're up to season 5, episode 2, which is Hostage Part 2, which aired originally September 27th, 1996.
Just let me interject a little bit to say, so folks, in this episode, once Jeff's got past this bit, we will be talking about a couple of characters from a type point of view. Obviously, we'll concentrate on Frank Pembleton, ESFP. And there's a particular line coming up where he said, if I don't follow the rules, I die. Yeah, and SP is, they're always being told that. If you don't follow the rules, you'll die. By the SJs. And then we'll have, and then something Jason said that he thought that Giardello was very ESTJ in this. And maybe we can look at the differences between like the STPs and the SFPs. Whereas the STPs weren't that upset by the school shooting as much as the SFPs. So certainly Lewis was more upset than Kellerman. And then, so this is just a little preview. And then also how in one scene, Kellerman seemed to have an FI bypass. Right. So back to his Jeffness.
Okay, so I was going to say that the episode was written by Julie Martin, Tom Fontana, and James Yoshimura, and directed by Jean de Seconza.
Yep.
I don't actually know how to pronounce that name, so that's my over dramatic, bad French attempt at it. So, anyway, obviously both of those, the writers and directors, are Homicide veterans at this point. And I'm going to go straight to David B226 Morris's summary / review, because he usually explains what happens in the episodes pretty much as he's going. So, Hostage Part 2 opens mere hours after the previous episode ended. The situation at the school is still tense, but the tension does not reach its apogee. I don't know that word.
Highest point. Apogee, highest point.
Okay. Apogee until 10 minutes in, when the teacher of the class held hostage emerges with the outlaw's demand, his pig. This turns out to be one of the rare occasions on Homicide when the viewer knows more than the police. The hostage taker and subsequent killer of 4 people at the school is Jerry Uba, the suspect in the murder that Bayless is investigating. Mere minutes later, Uba sets himself on fire as QRT and the homicide detectives storm the school. With the hostage taker in the hospital, the detectives can finally get to work. This case would seem to be easier to handle than some of the other red balls. The suspect is in custody, the murder weapon has been found. It's basically a matter of filing the paperwork. But for some reason, G takes the murders of these people a lot harder than some of the other murders that have happened. He demands that Bayless get a confession from Uba, that Kellerman and Lewis get the interviews done, that Ed Danvers speed up the process of charging Uba, and that he be present when Uba is charged. Yapikoto does some of his best work when Giardello is angry, and here he is raging. One of the highlights of the episode occurs after Uba is charged, and G, with a look of extreme contempt on his face, says, "Get well soon," at the bedridden Uba. Equally good is Kyle Secor as Bayless. For perhaps the first time since the show started 4 years ago, Tim gets to handle an interrogation completely on his own. He continues to demonstrate what a brilliant cop he is. Admittedly, though, Jerry Uba is not a complicated criminal. He went to the middle school to kill himself and murdered his mother so that she wouldn't be left alone. The shots of Uba covered with third-degree burns in the hospital reveal him as more pathetic than anything else. That's all the police work that's happening on Homicide this week. The rest of the drama emerges, as is usually the case, from the characters, particularly Frank Pembleton. Both at home and on the job, Frank seems almost feeble and pathetic. He can't remember his home phone number, keeps calling coffee bagel, and is stumbling over words. Things are almost as bad at home, where we reveal another problem: his medication has rendered him impotent. He also seems to be fumbling and frustrated around Mary and his daughter. And despite everything that has happened to him, in many ways he has the same adamant personality. He won't accept help or knuckle under to his condition, which is why he feels so incredibly useless at a place where he used to be a king. This leads him to do some very foolish things, like pour his medication down the sink. More importantly, this will cause fractures in relationships with both Tim and Mary, but that is for later. Other subplots are unfolding for other minor characters. Brody has been evicted from his apartment, is now sleeping in the squad room. For the next few months, he will be invited in and consequently kicked out of almost all of his coworkers' apartments. This week, the detective in question is Munch. This almost doesn't come off because Brody is pissed at Munch's hostile attitude towards Frank, but eventually Brody does get invited in with strict instructions not to look in the medicine cabinet. Perhaps Munch is still in the 60s. Ed Danvers, in the meantime...
What's that a reference to? About looking in the medicine cabinet?
Implying he's got some sort of drugs in there, I guess.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
Ed Danvers, in the meantime, reveals that he is getting engaged to a public defender named Meryl Hansen. It is clear this news causes pain for Sergeant Howard, even though she tries to cover it up. And the next line contains a minor spoiler, so I'll skip that. Hostage Part 2 is frustrating in some respects because so much is left unresolved, but this is what Homicide does best, so it's not necessarily a negative. It's not quite as good as the first part, but it does feature good performances from the leads as well as the side characters. There are very few big moments, just a lot of little ones that register effectively. My score, 8.5. And I would say on that note, actually, it was one of the things I like about Homicide is the continuity of characters that, the minor characters that are used throughout the show. And we got a very brief appearance in this episode from the uniform cop that Felton referred to as Marky Deutsch.
Right.
He was the one that brought the pig from animal control.
Yeah.
So anyway, over to you, Ben.
Right. So if you look at the screen, why does the guy that plays Danvers, why does he get a tick above his name? What about us? I mean, let's see what we would look like with a tick above our name. Let's have a look on the camera here. There we go. So what about you, Jeff? Are you going to write Jeff with a tick above your name in future?
No, I settled just for how you did it before that with putting the top on the J, because when people write the J without the top, then I tell them they misspelled my name because it has a top on the J.
Yeah. But just put a little tick on there. Giving yourself marks. Right. Right. Or sponsored by Nike. Right. In fact, if you were a sportsman and you had one of those like Slavic type names with one of them on, you could really get a tie-in deal with Nike. Right.
I'd rather be like that XFL guy and have "He Hate Me" on the back of the shirt.
Well, actually, people thought those games were rigged, but they actually introduced a lot of technology that was, that what they called the Sky Cam. That was actually invented in about 1984. But the reason why they didn't use it is that somebody had the patent for about 25 years, and then the patent ran out, and everybody started using it. Right.
Okay. Focus, Ben. Focus.
Yes, focus. Yes. Right. Anyway, so typology. Right. First things first. There was that scene where Kellerman, where he started to act like a real ESTP, and I would have had. I've written here. I would have directed Bayliss to be far more upset with Kellerman joking that it was Bayliss's fault the shooter shot up the school, because he joked about the fact that you're the one that took his pig away that made him go to the school. And I would have had Bayliss. Bayliss is a feeler, and all those kids have been shot, and just a suggestion that he contributed to it. You know what I mean? I don't think he would laugh that off. What do you reckon?
Well, I guess, I mean, you can sort of say that in the situation that he was still sort of, in shock about the whole thing. So he wasn't going to get that riled up about it at that point.
Yeah. Also, he seemed to be not fully aware of what was going on with the siege. Bayliss, because maybe he was working on another case.
Well, that's the thing, is he's distracted by two things. One is the case that he's working on, but also he's worried about Frank the whole time, too.
Yeah.
That's never left his mind, and you can tell that. So he's got those distractions where until the point at which until he learned the information that the hostage taker was his suspect, he wasn't really thinking much about that.
And as a director, because you saw how upset Lewis was on this scene. When Kellerman did that joke, I would have had Lewis give him a bit of a glare. Because, it got to Lewis. But what I would say, though, is the actor tried to give Kellerman a bit more FI, a bit more of a heart, a bit more humanity. Where you saw the way he played it later on. It's just that the way he was written in this particular scene, you're not exactly getting to him. It has his moments of what? Of ESTP-ness or something else?
I mean, of feeling towards people,
Yeah, I think that's the actor though.
So yeah, when he got the call about the girl, that
was good.
It was sort of hitting him at that point.
Mm.
That they were still, the victims were still happening because, you had somebody who was injured that then died later. So.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that was due to the actor rather than something that was explicitly in the script.
Well, obviously, I don't have a way to know that without not only seeing the script, but also seeing, the scene being filmed and what the director said, so I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And Mira gets a very good performance as the teacher. In fact, was nominated for an Emmy Award for it.
Wow. I wouldn't have nominated
her. She didn't win, though.
Right.
Continued the tradition of Homicide having guest actors nominated for Emmys and then not winning.
Right. And actresses. Right. I would have...
It happened previously with Robin Williams and Lily Tomlin.
Right. Well, that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, a lot of it is the more successful shows. It's like they gave a load of awards to Titanic and Lord of the Rings, even though they weren't very good on the acting and writing fronts. Well, certainly Titanic. Anyhow, then there was stuff. Notable thing is, this was good acting from Andre Braugher, and then that baby's got a big throw. Right. Oh yeah, I just put this in to show just Kyle Seacles put some weight on in between seasons. Now, I wonder if he did it deliberately.
You already talked about that in the previous.
Yeah, I know.
episode.
I know, but I'll bring things up. Oh, and this was American TV in terms of the technical specifications, was not as good as TV in Europe, because they had 525 lines and we had 625 lines. But the United States went to high definition before the UK. Right. Right.
Yeah, that was the scene that I mentioned Morgan's line about, because he said that he was giving orders outside his jurisdiction, and people follow them even when they don't when they don't necessarily have to. As far as he's not the boss of the paramedics, but
yeah, but
it's that natural role where he takes charge of the situation and people do what he says to do, even when he's not their direct boss.
yeah, but not every ESTJ is 6'4" with a big voice.
Well, right. Obviously, that although sometimes it seems like they are, for whatever reason, that it seems to coincide with physically intimidating people as well. But not everybody. Of course, I've known some small stature females who are ESTJ, but they still have that command, even when they're not physically intimidating. They still command people's attention.
Oh yeah, no, and 99% of the audience would have been on his side, help the innocent victim rather than the criminal.
Right, that's one of those where you definitely there's a definite line in the sand drawn there where everybody is like, yeah, why are you wasting time with the guy who killed people and helping him?
Now,
when you got a girl dying over here.
Now, if this was made even 10 years ago, the burn makeup would have looked a lot more horrific. Whereas that just...
Man, it's enough for me. I can't look at the screen when you got that on.
Oh, right. It's just that there's a similar thing when they did this in Battlestar Galactica in 2003, and then they did it maybe in about 2006, where the burns look really bad, especially when it was young Adama's lover, and she was not all burnt up, and she was asking what is her face like. But yeah, I mean they really burned them up. Whereas this just looks like it's a chimney sweep, right? And
it's pretty bad to me.
Yeah. But what got me with this is I wondered something about these hats. Maybe it's just tradition that they want to wear these like old hats. So it's a bit old hat, Jeff. Those old hats.
You really harp on the hats.
Yeah, I do, because I think it's terrible. They should have some modern
fireman hats.
They should have some modern technology, right? Right. But I think it's tradition. Because they always seem to have like the symbols on there. Don't know, like it looks like the same kind of hats they would have worn 50 years ago. That it's the traditional, you know what I mean, like pride in their department.
I don't know, because I haven't studied the history of fireman uniforms, so I don't know.
Right, and then Shiner is good in this.
Yeah, I liked that line about, where Jasper says it's over. And Lewis is like, maybe for you. We're just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, there's always great reaction shots from the ESTJ. Right. Well, maybe we could say a bit more about ESTJs, Jeff. Because, I have titled this MBTI in Homicide.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's have a look. Let's go through for those that don't know, let's have a look at what Guardians want. Right. Here we go. What we got here? We've got self-image. Dependable, beneficent, which means actively kind, doing good deeds, and respectable. Dependable, beneficent, respectable. And then you've got the SP is artistic, audacious, adaptable. we'll get on to Frank in a moment. Was there anything else? I don't think there was that much particularly ESTJ about him in this episode.
Well, I mean, it was just the taking charge aspects.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely an interaction style.
Yeah, in terms of making demands of people, whether or not he was actually the boss of those people.
In fact, even Barnfather.
What?
He even tried to take. He even stood up to Barnfather as well.
Yeah, Morgan said people listen to G. Which, yeah, so that's the biggest thing there is just there's that not only taking charge, but people responding to that taking charge. They listen, even if you're not a tall black man.
Right.
Yeah, when I first watched that episode with my mom and that last scene where he pours the medication out, she said, I had a feeling he was going to do that. My mom is a 9 of J, so, as we all know, they're psychic. No.
Yeah. Rather than, just having watched the episode and knowing the character. But,
yeah.
Because there was that bit where he wrote, if I don't follow the rules, I'll die.
Yeah. I don't remember the line he said exactly right after that, but yeah, that scene is great because it's like he's expressing the struggle.
Yes.
The SP struggle, even if it's not, somebody recovering from a stroke, but just in general, it's like constantly being told, you're supposed to follow these rules and do all these things. And, he's expressing how that's the thing is that SPs don't want to be locked down by anything, freedom restricted. And he's sitting there in the car saying like, it's like walls coming in on me because I've got to take this pill. I'm a slave to this pill. These things that I have to do are keeping me down. I can't do what I want to do. Like earlier in the episode, when he was talking about the coffee and calling it bagel, he mentions, he can't enjoy it because one of the things he's not supposed to have is caffeine, I guess, in recovering from a stroke. So it's like he's making the coffee for the other people, but he doesn't even get to drink it himself.
I did not know that.
I don't think it's actually been mentioned up to this point yet, but he's not smoking anymore either, which is another thing that he used to do obviously a lot. So he's having to restrict himself in these indulgences that he normally had, and he's having to take pills, and he's basically feeling like his life has been reduced to these rote actions. He's got to follow this routine that isn't what he wants to do, and he's a prisoner to it.
So what it might be is like the one benefit of the stroke is it might help him kick his cigarette addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell if he picks that back up again or not. But yeah, I thought that was one of my, if not my favorite scene, it's right up there in this episode, is the scene with him and Bayless in the car when he's talking about you expect me to be different. He said like I'm supposed to start being like nice to people or something, and Bayless is the one saying like, I'm uncomfortable because this is not my usual routine. He even mentions, I'm used to looking at the right side of your face instead of the left side of your face.
Yeah, and it says, well, now you can look at the back of my face.
Right, yeah, I liked those exchanges a lot.
Right then, so we're up in the amount of typology in this hangout. So so for instance, about that stuff with freedom, as Jeff was saying, that what we've got here, it can be about power, ESTPs, but it's always about freedom for the SP temperament. I think that's true. Do you think that's true of Frank? That a lot of the times he is trying to win the moment.
Oh yeah. And obviously in his job, a lot of that has been, interrogations of suspects and things like that, where he's trying to take whatever tack will lead him to a confession. But it's obviously not always that.
And I saw a bit of the first episode the other day, and even in that scene where he's in the garage and he's got the key and it's not got the number on, and he's still trying to win the moment.
Yeah.
With
yeah, because he's determined to not show any weakness or whatever to Felton, because Felton's like, we can go get another one, and he sees that as that would be. I would be ceding this to you, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it my own way.
You see, that's how I would like the dialogue to be, like it was in the first episode. Because it was both good and realistic. Both witty and realistic. So, for instance, Munch talking about, like, and if Munch was written more like that as well. But you said the network told them to write it less smart.
Well, what the network said was not things that were confusing. So in a sense, the producers, the writers thought they had to dumb it down a little bit because they felt like the dialogue was a little too rapid.
Yeah.
Visually, they said there were too many jump cuts and visually distracting things, so they told him to tone that down. They told him to put more color and not have it be as dark looking. So some of that was dictated by the network, yes.
I suppose some of the dialogue in that first episode was a little bit like Chris Boucher's dialogue, where it was you'd have little short replies where...
Yeah. And a lot of it was directly taken from the book, so you had pieces of dialogue that were... they were trying to kind of get as many of those things they could stick into the first episode that were directly out of the book. And I think over the years, as you see those things put back, like when David Simon got more involved with the show, starting with season 5, you started to see more of those things. Like there was actually a little bit in towards the end of season 4 when they did the scene where Munch was talking about Bolander, because he directly read a passage from the book about the description of why Bolander was called the big man, or I guess why Warden, the guy's real name was Donald Warden, was called the big man. It wasn't just about his size. Anyway, and you see more of that as it goes on. Later on this season, there's an episode called The Documentary that has a whole section that's directly taken out of the book too, about like the detectives talking to a suspect. And in the book, of course, it's just written as if it's like one detective, because it's sort of narration by the author, whereas in the show they alternate between the characters. But anyway, obviously we'll get to that episode later. But
right, so here we've got some stuff on the SJs. What we've got here is want to fit in, to have membership, hunger for responsibility, accountability, and predictability. Tend to be generous, to serve, and to do their duty. Establish and maintain institutions and standard operating procedures. Tend to protect and preserve, to stand guard unworn. Look to the past and tradition. Foster enculturation. Never heard that word before. With ceremonies and rules. Trust contracts and authority. Want security and stability. Think in terms of what is conventional, comparisons, associations, and discrete elements. Interesting there about comparisons, because they do value NE in function terms. Generally are serious, concerned, and fatalistic. Usually are skilled at ensuring that things, information, and people are in the right place, in the right amounts, in the right quality, at the right time. Frequently gravitate towards business and commerce. So that pretty much fits G. Any comments on that, Jeff?
And Bayless and his wanting to make sure Frank has everything he's supposed to have at the time he's supposed to have it, and is following his doctor's orders and all that. See, that's the thing, is I think, in that scene in the car, it's like I feel Pembleton's frustration very strongly, despite not having been through the exact same experience he has. I understand that feeling very well. Bayless, I think, he kind of is looking at him with a sense of like, well, yeah, you have to do these things, but that's just what life is a series of doing the things you have to do. So he doesn't understand what it feels like to feel like, your freedom is being restricted by doing those things, because he just sort of looks at it as that's just, he actually, SJs take comfort in those things. It's like, you have a routine, and that's part, so for him, it's like, not that he wants to experience a stroke, obviously, but he looks upon it as people helping you to follow these things and stay on your schedule and do these things you're supposed to do is a benefit to you. So he doesn't understand why it bothers Frank as much as it does.
Well, I mean, Frank's supposed to be about 33 in this. I mean, you had a child in your early 20s, and I think you've had some situations where you've had to take your pills.
Oh yeah,
stay around.
I've never had a stroke, but I have to take medication every day, and I hate the fact I have to do that. I don't like the fact that I can't sleep if I don't take a pill. That is annoying to me. So I accept it as part of life, but I don't like it.
Right, and then we've got for the SPs, or improvisers, as Linda Bones calls them. Want the freedom to choose the next act, seek to have impact to get results, want to be graceful, bold, and impressive, generally are excited and optimistic, are absorbed in the action of the moment, are oriented toward the present, seek adventure and stimulation, hunger for spontaneity, trust impulses, look, and their ability to solve any problem they run into. Think in terms of variation, have a talent for noticing and describing rich detail, constantly seeking relevant information, like freedom to move, festivities, and games. Tend to be natural negotiators, seize opportunities, usually are gifted tacticians, deciding the best move to make in the moment, the expedient action to take, are frequently drawn to all kinds of work that require variation on a theme.
Yeah, so in the final scene of this episode, you see Frank makes a spontaneous decision to dump the pills out because he's looking at it as, okay, I'm trapped in this routine, and I need to change something. So that's what he decides to do in the moment. Also,
it had sort of been set up earlier in the episode about the side effects of the pills.
Right. Yeah. So all the effects of it, it's not just the fact that he has to take it, but the effects that it has. He decides, well, this is the action I'm going to take to change what the problem is. So.
Yeah, and loads of people like end chemotherapy because the chemotherapy is like hell to them.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's the contrast, because likely in the same situation, Bayless or even G would not have done the same thing, because they would have still complained about the effects of it, but would have still done what the doctor told them to do.
Yeah, if they respected the doctor.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the thing is, and that actually could be a difference even within the Guardian temperament, because what I've noticed is somebody who I think is an ISFJ like Bayless is more likely to go to keep the same doctor, even if they didn't necessarily respect him, and just to complain about him. Whereas an ESTJ is more likely to switch doctors and say, well, this person's incompetent, I'm going to go for the different doctor.
Yeah, because that's something that Dario Nardi said, that he said that ESTJ will only listen to someone who's in authority if they also respect them. So it's it's a higher bar for an ESTJ to listen.
Yeah, my one of my ESTJ coworkers, because I have two of them, one male, one female, and the female one told me that she has a limit for how long she'll wait in a doctor's office, because I was talking about, how doctors make you wait. And she said, if I have to wait longer than this amount of time, I don't go back to that. And I tell them up front, this is how long I'm waiting. No longer than that. And it's one of those things that, just hit me. I'm like, I can't imagine that I would have ever got, because I hate doctor's offices, but I feel like the whole situation is like just uncomfortable to me. And I can't imagine going in a place and just being like, this is the amount of time I'm going to wait. And you need to see me before then, just the idea that I would go in and tell somebody that is just.
I'll tell you, if you started a scene like that, that would get a laugh. That would definitely get a laugh. Someone walking up.
Mm-hmm. But she's serious.
Yeah, I know. Because it would be great, fantastic character comedy that's based in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That there were people like that.
Right.
That's a great example. Right. Don't be surprised if I prompt you to talk about that story again in future.
Well, I can say just today, we went out to eat, and the waitress brought my drink refill, and she put her fingers on my straw as she put the straw back in the glass. And I noticed it. And I made a joke about I've got whatever cooties she has now. But I, at the time, said, I mentioned what my male ESTJ coworker had said. Under the circumstances, he would not have just laughed that off. He would have made a big deal about her doing that.
Because because you've got the person not doing their job right, you've got the lack of respect implied by them not being careful enough with the straw. Do you think ESTJs are always implying a lack of respect?
It sometimes seems like it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, why are people, and I see that from ENTJs as well. There's that attitude of, why aren't people doing things the way I think they should be doing them? The difference is with the STJs, it's usually based on the standards of, what they grew up with, or the community, or what, that kind of thing. Whereas ENTJs, it can seemingly not necessarily have to do with that. It's, their own formation of what's the most logical or efficient way to do things. And that's what people should be following.
Right. Well, let's have a look at this one on the left see how much Munch fits this. Although,
okay.
Right, look. Want knowledge and to be competent to achieve mastery. Seek expertise to understand how the world and things in it work. Are theory oriented. See everything as conditional and relative. Are oriented to the infinite. Trust logic and reason. Want to have a rationale for everything. Are skeptical. Think in terms of differences, delineating categories, definitions, structures, and functions. Hunger for precision, especially in thought and language. Usually are skilled at long-range planning, inventing, designing, and defining. Generally are calm, foster individualism, frequently gravitate towards technology and sciences, tend to be well suited for engineering and devising strategy, whether in the social sciences or physical sciences.
Well, the first thing I would say is I don't entirely agree with that description, in that, from my point of view, I don't think most NTs foster individualism. But maybe that's just by comparison, they seem less that way than SPs do. But
maybe for themselves.
Well, yeah, I don't doubt that they want to have their own independent way of looking at things, like the skepticism and all that fits. But as far as fostering individualism, I don't really agree, because it seems like NTs, they think of people as part of systems and being statistics and things like that. And it's less about the actual individual human being. That's from my perspective what it seems like. But anyway, as far as Munch goes, this particular episode didn't feature a lot of his theorizing and stuff, but obviously there's been plenty of times in the past where he's kind of gone off on tangents about such things. Like, for instance, that episode where he was talking about, when Bayless's back was hurting, and Munch was talking about the studies that were done on what was most effective in back pain and helping back pain or whatever, and he said that most effective was nothing. And then he was like, people advocate for all these other things, but who advocates for nothing? And Bayless says, you.
You see, that was good dialogue.
Yeah.
We need to get back to that. Was that from his act?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I in a weird way, I can see Munch, because these are a bit more gem. I can see Munch fitting the ENTP a little bit better than it fits this.
Yeah, well, I think it's, there's, like I said, elements in it, theory oriented. That's true.
Yeah.
He does want to understand the world. He expresses that skepticism for sure, because he feels like he's lived long enough in the world that he has a lot of, I would say it's George Carlin-esque in terms of his observations of things. There's very much a sort of sarcastic response to a lot of stuff. Like, he doesn't, he can theorize, but he still doesn't have like any particular confidence that humans are going to do the right thing, whatever that may be, or whatever the thing he thinks people should pursue, because he basically is like, he has that kind of perspective of humans are just, animals who walk on 2 feet kind of thing.
Yeah.
In terms of he's not so he's not, I could say there's probably quite a variety in terms of NTs, in terms of what their viewpoint is in terms of what can be changed, because there's some that are constantly thinking, there's all these things we can do to make humanity better, but then there's others that are much more cynical about it, like, I've seen enough to know that these things aren't going to change. So
I think that Munch could have been written a little bit better, or at least as well as he was in the first season.
You mean in this episode, or just in general in the last?
I'd say in general that he could have been written better, in that a little bit more of the NT temperaments come in. I mean, I can't see how, like, say, someone like Frank could be written better, or Giardello be written better in terms of like their actual character. Maybe some like funnier lines and things, but in terms of like their characterization, I don't see how they could have been written much better. But I can see Munch, how he could have been written a little bit better.
And part of that may have to do with the perspective of the writers themselves, in terms of, we don't know whether or not there's any NT writers on the staff.
That's what I mean.
So, Munch is, limited in terms of perspective of how of the people writing him. So, I think there are some episodes where he's better than others, and it may be possibly that the writers of those episodes are more in tune with that. And obviously some of it comes from Belzer himself. And obviously the character is around for a long time, because at the end of Homicide, he went on to Law & Order SVU and was on for a long time after that. So, I haven't seen most of that, so I don't know how his characterization varies on that show versus how it is on Homicide. So I can't really speak to that.
Yeah, I mean,
I see that at some.
So yeah, I mean, I did see about half of the first episode the other day, and I also, it helps when he's with Bolander.
Yes, that definitely was the case. They played off each other very well,
and
the contrast was very strong with those two, in terms of, and this kind of highlights back to Please Understand Me Too, in terms of, he in that book describes Guardians and Rationals as being opposite temperaments from each other, and you kind of saw that with Munch and Bolander. They kind of highlighted the things they were opposite on a lot of the time.
Did you
So
think?
yeah, that's part of the problem is not having Bolander around. Munch doesn't have somebody to play off quite as well, but that will change again in the future as he'll actually will have partners again.
Oh, good. Do you think
He had a
Bolander?
very limited, very brief period of time where he had Russert as a partner, but they didn't really develop that relationship. It just didn't last long enough for them to do much with it. So
Yeah, and it didn't sort of work. I don't think that could have really worked.
But yeah, there'll be some more. There's a couple of pretty good Munch episodes later this season, so there'll definitely be some things for him to do.
I mean, it pretty much needs to be a guy, I reckon, with Munch.
Yeah,
it would have been tricky for it to have been a female.
I think he could have been I think he and Howard, make a pretty good duo. So it has to, if it's a female, it has to be somebody who is somebody that can hold their own for sure.
Yeah, but it's like because
they can give and take it much.
Because usually it's like it's a lot of it is Munch complaining about women and stuff, and you just think that if you had a female partner, that there'd be certain areas you couldn't go into and be as frank about as he was with, say, Stanley.
Yeah.
So it would have to be like new kinds of things. So it would be tricky. It would be tricky.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yes, and like I said in the first episode, you got that stuff about you got the NE thing of who do you think I am, Montel Williams, all that kind of stuff, like doing the comparison, Larry King versus Montel Williams. You know, because he got upset that he talked to the other cop, but not to him.
Well, I mean, to follow up with what we said, or what I said in the review of the first part of Hostage, with Munch's behavior in this, after the first one where I said he was kind of taking on that role of being the one who said, hey, I'm not going to baby Pembleton. In this episode, he specifically says to Brody, I wouldn't be treated that way if the same thing had happened to me. But then Brody makes a comment where he says, no wonder your partners keep leaving you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after that, he says to G, maybe you should let up on Frank a little bit. And so, again, it's an interesting thing to say, well, how much of that is, did Munch really have a revelation there where he thought, hey, maybe I am being too hard on Frank? Or he's still sort of using, manipulation tactics to kind of affect the dynamic there in the office, in the squad room. You can't necessarily tell how much is what. Again, when I asked the question of the first one, is it an emotional reaction he's having to Frank, or is it something else? And I think that's the interesting thing about when you talk about, the temperament and his view of kind of what his role is in there. He may look at it as, okay, well, I'm giving Frank a hard time about the guy. When he helps him by giving him his phone number, and then he says this thing to G, it's like, it's showing, one perspective is to say that he was demonstrating that he does have some compassion, and isn't just, messing with people. So
I think there was like a good defense in the previous episode where Munch said, hey, you didn't go visit Stanley in the hospital, or you didn't return my calls,
right,
and stuff like that. So let's just say I can say that Munch is motivated by, and one thing ENTPs don't like is their view of ethics is that if you're going to have ethics, it needs to be one standard, no double standards. It has to be completely consistent. And he's noting the inconsistency there of, you know, why should I be nice to him? He wasn't nice to me. He didn't care about me. And also the thing of, not just that, he didn't come to visit Stanley, the guy who's just retired on him. And he misses...
And he expresses, you know, that a little bit of envy in terms of what he says about, I wouldn't have been treated the same way if I had a stroke. People wouldn't be doing favors to get me back in the homicide unit. And so there's a little bit of that in that he's grousing about that, but in a sort of a way, that's an admission that he's not as respected a cop as Frank is.
Well,
so
that's what you get with the NTPs, that they're not actually respected for their full abilities because they are ENTPs. It's like with Boris Johnson.
He mentions, you know, I come in every day, I do my job, you know, I solve cases just like he does, but I don't. He basically says, you know, Frank, he basically accuses him of, you know, being a drama queen. He's like, he's got all this flair about everything he does. He demands attention from everybody, whereas I just do my job and I don't ask for that.
Right. Was there a scene? There was a scene a couple of seasons ago where a bit of an argument between Frank and Munch.
Frank actually shoved him across the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the that was right after the you know, the shooting. The cops had been shot. You know, when they were trying to get the guy who shot him. And Munch didn't think Frank handled the interrogation of Pratt right. So he didn't get a confession.
Right then. So you said you were going to say something. Yeah.
And then we had a good SP moment, you might say, in an exchange between Lewis and Kellerman about Howard and her reaction to learning that Danvers was engaged, because Kellerman says a question I'm sure many have been asked: why do you push her buttons every chance you get? And Lewis says, because it's so easy.
But then you could also say, but it's not a challenge, and SP is like a challenge.
Well, yeah, I think that's actually probably what Kellerman's perspective was.
Yes.
He's the one that's like, this isn't, you know, this isn't the challenge, so why do you keep doing it? And the basic answer is because it's still fun for him, so that's why he does it. And because it's his one chance to, you know, kind of react to the fact that she's an authority figure now, where they used to be equals as detectives, and now she's a sergeant, so he's got to have that little rebellion against authority at the same time.
Right. Actually, I don't even know why they really need that role, though. Should be more useful as a detective than as a sergeant. They don't really need that position of sergeant.
Yeah, well, like I said in the previous one, they didn't do it the way that it actually was in the homicide unit, and that's described in the book. So they sort of halfway do it, and it doesn't work either direction. Yeah, so they needed to either, like you said, either just leave her as a detective, or else have her actually fill the role of the sergeant the way that is described in the book. But if they did that, it would change the dynamic with G and the detectives, because the reality is that the sergeant in real life acted as more of a go-between between the lieutenant and the detectives, whereas on the show, they have G very much in your face with the detectives themselves. So that was, because they did that, it really does make Howard not really useful in that role, because G doesn't often use a go-between. He comes directly to the people he wants to tell something. So the difference between, you know, that and the way D was in real life is that he was much more like bark at the sergeants, and then the sergeants bark at the detectives. So there was a, you know, another layer of management there.
I think I might give this one an 8. Because it wasn't predictable. There was good Frank stuff in it. I think I might give this one an 8.
You might, or you do.
I think I do give it an 8. But remember, folks, it's an 8 for Homicide. So an 8 for Homicide is not as good as an 8 for Red Dwarf, or an 8 for Only Fools and Horses. So.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, Homicide is better than either of those shows.
Oh, in your opinion, but not in mine.
So really, if it's an 8 for Homicide, it would be a 47 for whatever.
Although, having said that, folks, Jeff has not seen either of those two programs.
I've seen enough to know. Anyway,
right.
I give this one a 10 because in some ways I think it's even better than the first part. In other ways, not quite. It's sort of like it dips in a couple of areas, but then goes even higher in other ones, because the emotional scenes to me and the gut-wrenching scenes are like what really puts this episode over the top. And the fact that there is less action, I guess you could say, than the first part is offset by the fact that there's more powerful scenes and gut-wrenching stuff and dialogue in this, and the great scenes with Frank, with Mary, with Bayless, all of that stuff that just swirls together to make a very powerful episode, in my opinion. So I give it a 10. And up next we have another really powerful episode, because they're really hitting us over the head with stuff in this one, but that's how it goes. The next one, actually, when TV Guide did a list of their top 100 television episodes of all time, now this was back in the 90s, keep in mind, so anything since then would have been on the list. The next episode was on that top 100, so just goes to show there were some critics who were highly complimentary of the next one, which is called Prison Riot. And the cool thing about it is, in addition to plenty of other things, you'll get to see some old friends or some old faces you may recognize from previous episodes. So that's all I'll say about that.
Maybe there are some flashbacks. Right.
Maybe, we'll see.
Right. So I think that'll be about it, folks. Now I've got to find the window to end the hangout.
Right.
Right. And it's goodbye from me.
Bye.
Right.